Video in Vectr, I will show you how to create some shapes and how you can easily modify and edit the shapes that you've created. All right, so I'll create a new file again. Okay, so here's your canvas here, and so I'm just going to play around with some of these shapes. So let's say I choose to draw a rectangle. I just click and hold my mouse, okay, and I have drawn this rectangle here. This program operates on what's called vector drawings, okay? So vector lines and vector curves and all of that. What that means is that I can take any point on this rectangle and I can edit it, okay? And I can kind of transform this shape any way that I want. Here's what I mean by that. So I'll click outside of my rectangle, or pretty close to a square. I'll click outside of it, and at any point, if I double click inside my rectangle, so I just double clicked, you will see these 2 points pop up in each corner. I'm going to show you what you can do with those 2 points, and then I'll also show you some other things as well. So with these 2 points, I can actually click and hold this point, and I can kind of drag this shape wherever I want. Okay. At any point, of course, you can just undo on your keyboard. So just press Control Z on your keyboard to undo. If you're on a Mac, it's Command Z. Okay. So I can drag this any way that I want. All right. So that's pretty neat. The other thing I can do, if I look at this inside little dot or circle, if I drag that, what that does is it creates a curved corner, or a curve instead of a point on the corner. Okay, so that's something else that you can kind of play with. Okay, again, I will undo. So that's what each of those 2 points does. The outer point kind of just stretches, or can shrink, or just kind of manipulates that point, but it keeps it as a point. Whereas the point on the inside, if I drag that, then it just curves that corner. Okay. What you can also do is so I clicked outside of the rectangle, and now if I do just a window, like a selection window, and sorry, actually, let's first double click in the rectangle again. Now if I do a selection window, okay, you can see that these 2 points are highlighted. Okay, these 2 points are highlighted. And so what that means now is, because I selected both of those points, I can actually now move just by grabbing one of the corners. Sorry, I undid the selection. Okay, so let me once again select both. I can actually now just move that point and it will change both corners. Okay, let's see what happens if I click on the inner corner there. It only changes that one still. Okay, let's double check that. Yeah, it's still, so if you move the inner circle there, it will only still move the one edge. But if you choose the outer, then you can kind of change your shape to a parallelogram or kind of anything like that. Okay. Another thing you can do, so if I click outside of my rectangle now, okay, so I've clicked outside. If I click once, I can move this around my screen. So I didn't double click in it twice, okay, I just moved it just once. Also there, I can scale it larger. So if I click on my rectangle just once, I can scale it larger, smaller, and I can rotate it. Okay, so I can also rotate it. So again, the difference there is if I just click inside the rectangle once, that allows me to scale or rotate. Okay, if I double click in the rectangle, then it allows me to transform the corners any way that I want. One of the other things you can do that's super powerful, that's really easy to do in Vectr, is if you double click inside of your rectangle, notice if I click anywhere, if I hover my mouse anywhere on this edge, or this edge, or this edge, that little circle pops up. That means I can create a point there. So if I click, okay, I have just created a new point there. Now watch. I can now edit that point okay? After the fact, after I have created my shape, I can go back and edit, and I can keep adding points, okay? I can keep adding points, and I can keep editing things. And you can see what happened there was, because it was a curved line here, or a curve, if I click somewhere on the curve, okay, it will then actually kind of do this funky thing where it kind of manipulates these curvy lines here. Okay, so if you kind of wanted to make some sort of a funky shape, that would be a good way to do it, okay, potentially. And so you can really just really manipulate this, almost like as if it's almost a Play-Doh almost, and you can choose anywhere on here to kind of play around with that. So anywhere along the edge, you can click and then manipulate that point. So pretty powerful how quickly you can take a rectangle to look completely different. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're thinking of ideas for your logo. Keep it in mind that you can manipulate basic shapes like rectangles, squares, and that stuff to kind of any shape that you want it to be. Okay, if you're patient enough with it, you can probably get it to work. Okay, so that is how you manipulate a shape, and it's the same thing with the rectangle and a circle. Let's just take a look at each one of those really quick. And actually, I'll just leave this at the bottom of my screen right now. Let's do this. So this just creates a rectangle, but with rounded corners, okay? One thing I didn't show you is take a look at the menu after you draw something. Take a look at the menu on the right, all the different options you have to kind of edit this shape. You can change the color, okay? So you can kind of go anywhere along the spectrum here and change the color. You can change the border. Okay, so if you click on the border here, so I clicked on that, I can change the thickness of the border. Okay, and then also change the color of it as well. Okay, so you can kind of play around with those settings. So this is possible on any closed shape. You can do this to any closed shape, and I can't emphasize enough, it does have to be closed. You can change the border to be in the center, on the outside, okay, or on the inside of your shape. Okay, so you can kind of play around with that. You can put shadows. You just have to make sure you check off that box there. Okay, so you can have a shadow and then just play around with you can see these arrows here. You can kind of play around with how that shadow ends up looking. Okay, so that's another thing that you can do. You can do an inset shadow. You can also kind of reduce the opacity of your shape, meaning it's getting a little bit more see-through. So if you have objects in the background, you can start to see them. Okay, so that's another thing there. All right, so that's something you may consider. Let's see a circle. Notice it draws an ellipse and you can't get it to draw a perfect circle. You may want to draw a perfect circle, right? So how do I get this to become a perfect circle? Well, here's what you do. Click the circle and hold Shift on your keyboard. If you hold Shift on your keyboard, it will snap to a perfect circle. Okay, snap to a perfect circle. Let go of Shift. Actually, first let go of your mouse and then let go of Shift. Okay, so if we do that again, so I hold Shift, I click and I drag. Okay, let go of my mouse and let go of Shift. Okay, now I have a circle. And actually the same goes for a rectangle. If you wanted to draw a perfect square, just hold Shift, okay, and then it'll snap to a perfect square. Okay, so same thing goes there. All right, so that's some basics there. I guess there's some other little things I can show you. Is if I wanted to, let's say move, see how right now these are moving apart from each other? I can get them to move together, okay? All I need to do is do a select window, okay? So again, so I just click my mouse, drag, okay, and kind of select enough where it selects both shapes. Now they've both been highlighted, and what you can actually do is right click on your mouse and group. So now what happens is these are grouped together and will move together. This may be useful when you're doing your logo, and you'll see when I show you an example of drawing a logo, I'm going to be grouping things, and because I need to move things together. So you'll see that might be useful. If at any time you want to ungroup them, okay, you just right click again and you go to ungroup, and now they move individually again. Okay. Copying and pasting. I guess that's another thing that I should show you. It's pretty straightforward. I think you should know by now that Control C is copy on your keyboard. Control V is paste on your keyboard. If you're using a Mac, it's Command C and Command V. So all you do is, I'm going to copy this, so I'm going to select it, then press, for me I'm on a Mac, so it's Command C. If you're on a PC, it would be Control C. Okay, and then paste, Command V, and it just created another one. So if you're creating eyes or something and you need the shapes to be the exact same size, right, and you can see how it's snapping to line things up. You see those blue lines that pop up? That means that you've lined them up, okay, which is good. The other thing you can do, and I guess I should show you, is let's say I wanted to bring this background shape to the front, okay? Let's say I want to bring this background shape to the front. Just click on it, okay? And you see these menus, this kind of menu pop up. You can send to the front. You can flip it. You can flip horizontal. It was already in the back, so it's not going to say send to back. It's there by default, okay? But you can send it to the front there as well. Okay, so just by clicking on the shape, you'll see that menu pop up, and you can kind of play around with that. All right, so I think that concludes everything I wanted to show you for just using the basic shapes and manipulating the basic shapes. Okay, so play around with that and start to get ideas for your logo.